Podcast excellence since 2005. This is the King of Podcasts radio network, kingofpodcasts.com.
I knew that movie was too realistic.
We are all a little depraved and debaucherous. Here is the King of Podcasts.
And a very early Merry Christmas from all of yours truly, King of Podcasts, yours. This is Depraved and Debaucherous, and of course, we're going to talk once again about that movie, It Ends With Us. I recorded an episode about it on May 14th of this year after I watched it. Because I remember I was watching something else in the theater, and that same weekend, that movie came out. And every woman that was there had heard about the book from Colleen Hoover that was written a couple of years before. It was mentioned that Blake Lively was the person that was going to be best set to go and play the role in this movie of the main character. And then we go into it, and here we go. We're back into the mix of things where Lily and Ryle, we're back to that again. I didn't realize that this movie was going to go and get back into such a big stir, but the last 2 days have been wild. So now, this movie, which we talked about back again on May 14th, saw the movie, set it up, everything. If you need me to go ahead and go through a real quick recursor about what the movie's about, it's a movie about a woman who is caught up in a relationship with a guy that's very much a narcissist, controlling, and then she confronts basically like a high school sweetheart. And the whole deal with that comes into play. So a whole love triangle comes out of that. But now, here we go. Justin Baldoni, who is the director of the movie and was responsible for making this movie possible, for directing it and doing the job of it, and his co-star, Blake Lively. Blake Lively right now is suing Justin Baldoni over allegations of sexual harassment. So she claims that Baldoni fostered a toxic workplace environment, including the director showing her nude videos and images of other women and discussing his previous alleged porn addiction. And she goes on in her lawsuit saying that, quote, I hope that my legal action helps pull back the curtain on these sinister retaliatory tactics to harm people who speak up about misconduct and help protect others who may be targeted. Now, I broke this movie down pretty extensively on the program. I'm going to play back some clips as to what the movie was all about. And I want to play back the original scene from this movie because obviously it was out in theaters when I did this episode. It's now on Netflix and it's available on streaming, so you can go and find it now. But needless to say, this sexual harassment lawsuit, this is real. And the fact that this movie was about this kind of issue where we see what happens with Blake Lively's character as she is dating Justin Baldoni's character and seeing what happens within the movie. It's all this shit. Okay, it's all this. Now, I'll go ahead and play back what in the movie happens when Lily is flirting with Ryle in a rooftop at the very beginning of the movie, which is what happens here, that it's this moment that Blake Lively's character opens herself up because when she meets this guy, it should have only been a one-night fling, maybe a situationship at the most. But look at the interaction back and forth. And this is the thing where this character, Ryle, Justin Baldoni's character, who's playing co-star and directing himself in this here. And now when you hear these words and you see this scene, now you realize it's a lot more realistic than we thought.
Okay, just shock me. You can say anything.
I want to have sex with you. You said to shock you.
I mean, what? How many, I'm sorry, how many women has this worked on?
I'm not a relationship person.
Yeah, I
never been good
that.
at that.
Well, but how do you know? You've never tried having a relationship or carbs. How do you know it doesn't work
Carbs?
for you?
I never said I didn't eat carbs.
And you don't look like a reckless snacker.
Well, thank you.
Now, the thing is, she doesn't decline him. She decides to go on detour. And the detour is she's expressing she's attracted to him. So from a sexual standpoint, she's interested. But now she's trying to play along with us here and letting her emotions kind of work around, will she let herself do it? Will she succumb? Because she had just come over dealing with mourning her father, who we learned later in the movie had been abusing her mother and was also abusing her, from what we were able to see in certain flashbacks of the movie, which were brought in front of us, which is why the high school sweetheart was around and actually became a focal point for stabilizing Lily as a person as she moved forward with her life. Back to Lily and Raul here and the flirtation, which is the red flags all over the place. He even drops the red flag in this movie saying, I haven't been in any relationships. And then she pushes on.
Love isn't for me.
Lust is nice, though.
I feel like you're missing out.
Am I?
See, she shouldn't have gone that far. But the thing is that I hate they're going to say this now, but this movie, because of this sexual harassment lawsuit, the allegations being made against Justin Baldoni now validate this movie was pretty well done, because this guy's intent was no different than the character he played. He was playing himself. Tell me I'm wrong. Back to the clip, because like I said, when you feel this here, you really sense what this character was doing. And as director, Justin Baldoni obviously felt comfortable reading these lines and saying them back to Blake Lively, and she's having to play back to him, and maybe not even realizing how much cringe this feels like now. Like, she can't watch this movie again.
You haven't answered my question.
I forgot. The question was.
How many women has this worked on?
All of them?
Oh. Well, I can't, I'm gonna have to break a record. I'm the kind of girl you take home to mama.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing, too. She was expected to be felt special. Once that little test question of hers comes out, she was hoping that he would have said, not everyone, or he would, if he said all of them, but that was just him being honest. So the thing is, it's funny where the character in this movie, Blake Lively's character, falls into the trap. But I guess that's how the book reads as well. So what are you going to do about that? But that's why he was probably so drawn to this role, drawn to directing this movie, because he gets it. He is this character. Like Colleen Hoover, you wrote the character, and guess what? Somebody figured out, I don't know if it was the studio or what, but somebody figured out you picked somebody so well suited to direct this movie because he's a predator himself. He's no better than the character he was playing. That's why the movie was so effective. That's why it got under my skin when I played it back. Just saying. I want to go back and just go into the movie here and talk about what happened here, because there's a lot to go and get from this. But like I said, if you didn't know what the movie was about, the story of Lily Bloom overcoming a traumatic childhood to embark on a new life in Boston and chasing a lifelong dream of opening her own business, she meets charming neurosurgeon Raul Kincaid, sparking an intense connection. But as the two deeply fall in love, Lily begins to see sides of Raul that remind her of her parents' relationship. When Lily's first love, the high school sweetheart, suddenly re-enters her life, her relationship with Raul is upended, and Lily must realize she must learn to rely on her own strength to make an impossible choice for her future. So I went through extensively talking about this. I'm going to just play with the clips that I said about it, because I think this is one of some of the better clips that I put out there. I was really on top of this. But I put, 8 clips out there, or 6 clips out there about this? Like, I was really on top of this, man. She let him in when she told him she can get him to settle, right? At that first chance encounter, when she opened up her mouth up in the rooftop, and she says the deal about, hey, I think you would be good if you could settle yourself down. Like, I think I would be I think I'd like to show you that it would be something you could do. Like, a relationship could be possible with you. Because he did open up and say that he's not the kind of person for relationships. Red flag. She just went along with it. Now, she left that up, and then this guy, in a very intricate sense, narcissistic as hell, is able to go ahead and find out where she is. I feel like when the story comes across, the chance coincidence that the sister just happens to find a place where she needs to go and find a job, and Lily was willing to go ahead and offer the job to her. She does the job, sure, but it's like that separation where it's Ryle and it's this sister in place. Something doesn't compute right there. Now, I don't know as well when it comes to the book from Colleen Hoover, how much leisure was done, how much was done to allow the movie to be, readapted for screenplay. What was added into the script? That's the part that also now intrigues me as to what happened there. So she's completely trying to brush him off, but he kept going. But because the guy is attractive and he's got six-pack abs and all this stuff, and he's a neurosurgeon, he's this catch of a guy for anybody else. For whatever reason, Lily's character wants to hold on to him anyway. He's not good for you, but it's like, I just can't help but go along with it. I'm going to just hold on to him. He's not a guy that he's not a guy that I feel like he doesn't repulse me. He's probably a good guy. She's still trying to play along and think, well, this guy is a catch for anybody else. And he's looking at me of all people. And I feel like maybe she kind of looks at herself down because of the fact that, she's alone and she's on with this business, but it's like she has no one else in the world. And that's the thing where she's in this big city. She's away from family and all the shit that happened with her. She's never overcome. It sounds like when we learn about all that happened to her in home and the parallels that happen between Ryle and what her dad did to her, we learn about so much about her trauma because we didn't know about really what it was that was really deep down inside that caused her to do things that she did. Wow. Now, when I look at what happens here and what this movie's about, and look, the guy himself, when you cast him, yeah, it all makes sense the way they put it because he's an attractive guy. For the most part, he's not like somebody that's that every girl's going to approach. He's not a run-of-the-mill your conventional because he's got the curly hair and Italian kind of like this, these different exotic features about him. Not your conventional every girl's going to go after him, but there are certain ones that will because something about him, and I think that's part of the thing too, is that he has that international flair. He has that exotic flair, he is Italian. So he looks very much Italian. He looks like he comes from, the old world. And you're kind of assuming the thought, well, he's not going to be some kind of guy like this. And everything else that comes into play, what this person is, his status. Remember this too. We always talk about who are the guys out there that these women, these delusional women are thinking about being with that are the top 1% of guys. How toxic can they be? 6-pack abs, 6-figure income, 6 inches or more well endowed, all these kind of things going on. But that might be just good enough for a lay, and that's it. And that's all it could be. But this character, because she was there vulnerable, and a happenstance meeting at a rooftop, just a chance meeting. And we don't know if this guy actually was tracking her down and saw her. I mean, obviously, he said something about the fact that he saw her up there before when she was sitting up there. So she decided to go and do this. And once again, the same thing goes along. It's this constant issue. What happens here? We're going to get more into what Justin Baldoni is being accused of. But like I said, it's the movie here. We have to understand that we see the similarities. We see that there's something now to this movie that adds much more intrigue. And now it's much more realistic than we ever imagined. We don't know everything that the mom went through, but the mom was a mess because of what happened to her too. She never got over what happened to her either because they're both alone in their thoughts, alone in their trauma. And who's there to go ahead and cope with them? There's nothing about therapy here, nothing about coping, nothing about a support system around to watch out for them after all this is done, right? And this guy, this narcissistic neurosurgeon hunk could rope her along and do anything he wanted to do with her. But once he is intimidated because high school sweetheart Atlas comes back because he's got the nice restaurant. He's grown up. Look at him. He's blossomed. He's glowing. He's glowing now. He's like, look at him. He's become hunk too. Wasn't a bad looking guy before, but look at him. Like, he just like became like, look at this great guy. And Ryle can't have anything of it. He can't, no, you're not going to get in the way of her. And cause she knew the story, knew the whole thing. And it's like, this is a threat. And Ryle treats it like a threat, like a bitch. And then we go back to that part. So it's the triggering. This was too easy for this guy to get into. Look, even the rape scene they put in and the actions he had of acting angry and acting out and having, bits of anger and showing them his explosions, way too realistic. Way too realistic to go and take on and believe, but it's true. And now we know it's true. Lily never really got a chance to go ahead and overcome her own issues. Then this shit happens. And then once Atlas comes into play, yes, a little bit of me says, well, you know what? Atlas coming back into the play, I can understand why Ryle can be jealous. But the way he reacted, horrible. Unspeakable, unacceptable behavior. Because then he decides to use it and then goes in this whole level of like just trying to attack every chance he gets. Because, at this point, he's not saying anything about like, don't see him again, all this kind of stuff. He knows he can't do that kind of thing to her because, she would probably walk away. So he's playing along and just not saying anything, but he's going to punish her for every interaction with Atlas or anything. Right. So there's those things that are going on in the play. Now let's get into the actual story of what actually happened here, because there's a lot that's going on. Now, in this story, Justin Baldoni's team, to give proper context, they refuted the allegations, claiming the legal action as an attempt to patch up Lively's reputation, which suffered in the wake of the beleaguered movie's release. Because Blake Lively, there was a lot of issues about how this movie was taken on and how it was handled during this part, because there was a lot of things that happened, some real specifics that were asked about during this movie. And everything just started coming in all at once. Like, I just saw a barrage of different things going on. So now, Lively claimed that Baldoni made inappropriate inquiries about her weight, comments about her dead father, and sexual remarks about the cast and crew. And that the situation became so unworkable that she and husband Ryan Reynolds demanded crisis talks during filming to put a stop to the behavior, according to the lawsuit. And there were other things that were brought in here that Blake Lively said were not allowed in the context of the movie. So the lawyer for Justin Baldoni says that they hired a PR crisis manager stemming from multiple demands and threats made by Mrs. Lively during production. According to TMZ, Blake Lively's demands, according to this during the movie, was no more showing nude videos or images of women to Blake, no more mention of Baldoni's alleged previous pornography addiction, no more discussions about sexual conquest in front of Blake and others, no further mentions of cast and crew's genitalia, no more inquiries about Blake's weight, no further mention about Blake's dead father. We don't know why he did it. I'm almost curious to see if he has something that he's going to try to convince people that this was something that was being done because he was trying to get more out of the role, trying to get more out of Blake Lively to make a much more realistic interpretation of Colleen Hoover's novel. Now, this PR person we're talking about here that we should make point of, PR crisis manager Melissa Nathan, was brought on board. It's the same person that helped represent Johnny Depp during the Amber Heard trial. So now she's coming in to represent Justin Baldoni against Blake Lively. And we know that Johnny Depp did well out of that whole setup from before. Now they talk about here about in the complaint, it was lodged with the California Civil Rights Department. There was a meeting back in January 2024 addressing Lively's claims and her demands about returning to work on It Ends With Us after the actors and writers strikes had ended and production for it to resume. Ryan Reynolds was reportedly in attendance at the meeting. And there were the things that we talked about here where there were certain things that could not be brought up once again. Lively complained that Baldoni had discussed Lively's weight with her trainer, pressed her to disclose her religious beliefs, and talked about his sex life in inappropriate ways. And that Jamie Heath, one of the producers of the film, CEO of Wayfarer Studios, showed Lively a video of his wife naked and giving birth. Lively also alleged that both Baldoni and Heath entered her makeup trailer without getting her permission first, including when she was breastfeeding her infant child. Baldoni claimed that he could communicate with the dead, including her father, who died in 2021, and she says, quote, "It was off-putting and violative for Ms. Baldoni to claim a personal relationship with her recently deceased father." Ms.? Mr.? No, I don't get that part. Baldoni's legal team comes back and says that it's shameful that Ms. Lively and her representatives would make such serious and categorically false accusations against Mr. Baldoni. It's another desperate attempt to fix her negative reputation, which was garnered from her own remarks and actions during the campaign for the film, interviews and press activities that were observed publicly, in real time and unedited, and which allowed the internet to generate their own views and opinions. So I guess she's having some trouble trying to get some new films or some new projects lined up as a result from all this. I'm not sure. Other issues that were asking for was no more adding of sex scenes, oral sex, or on-camera climaxing by Blake outside of the scope of the script that Blake approved when signing on to the project. So no more things that he could be asking her to do in this movie as well. And there was also an issue about how the movie should be marketed according to the lawsuit. And the Lively says that Baldoni's team engaged in a social manipulation campaign to tarnish her reputation. The text messages from the director's publishers of the studio said that Baldoni wants to feel like Lively can be buried and we can't write, we will destroy here. So in this particular movie, we heard all the issues about the marketing and what was going on with the on-set tensions. And there were rumors of the feud that did persist, which we heard about during the start of the movie. Blake Lively was blasted as tone deaf and shallow after she hosted an interview with her and co-stars, filmed to discuss the serious message behind the movie. And another clash came over Baldoni asking how much Lively weighed prior to a scene in which he was supposed to lift her. A-list actress said this made her feel fat shame, while those close to Baldoni said he was just trying to protect his back following an injury. Now, the movie was a box office hit. It did make its money past, and it just went like that. So there's a timeout of things that came off all to this, right? Everything starts now 3 days ago, December 20th. Lively files a lawsuit. Then Baldoni denies allegations 3 days later. And then we get next a couple of things happening to Baldoni right away. Things are already happening to him. He loses his representation. WME, which is his agency, they decided to go ahead and drop the actor, director, producer. And it was done by WME leadership on Saturday morning. Now, the agency did not respond to any requests for comment from Deadline.com. We're waiting to hear from that. But yeah, nothing's been said over there from his agents. Nothing about that at all. Done. Next, there is an award that was awarded to Baldoni by a women's organization, Vital Voices. And he was honored earlier this month by this nonprofit working with female business leaders for his vital role as a male ally to women and using his platform to inspire meaningful societal change. And then the organization rescinded the Voices of Solidarity award he had been honored with. He was recognized on December 9th. And then with the announcement of the lawsuit, they decided to rescind this whole thing altogether. The other thing that's also happened too is that there was another new project that he's in right now. Because Justin Baldoni has been hosting a podcast called Man Enough. And his co-host now, Liz Plank, who's an author and journalist, is now leaving the show. And she wrote to fans, "Thank you for trusting me with your hearts and stories, for holding space in mind, and for making the show what it was." And it was a show that was launched in 2021. And Man Enough was it's a show that explores what it means to be a man today and how rigid gender roles have affected all people. And Plank co-hosted it with Baldoni and Jimmy Heath, CEO of Baldoni's Wayfarer Studios. So I want to take a part where he is on this show, talking about his show called Man Enough, I want to just take something that was taken from a TED Talk that he put out there.
Men, I understand. Growing up, we tend to challenge each other. We got to be the toughest, the strongest, the bravest men that we can be. And for many of us, myself included, our identities are wrapped up in whether or not at the end of the day we feel like we're man enough. But I got a challenge for all the guys, because men love challenges. I challenge you to see if you can use the same qualities that you feel make you a man to go deeper into yourself. Your strength, your bravery, your toughness. Can we redefine what those mean and use them to explore our hearts? Are you brave enough to be vulnerable? To reach out to another man when you need help? To dive headfirst into your shame? Are you strong enough to be sensitive? To cry whether you are hurting or you're happy, even if it makes you look weak? Are you confident enough to listen to the women in your life?
So this guy is a male feminist, and that's a TED Talk he did 3 years ago. Or 4 years ago, excuse me. This is right before pandemic. And so he put that out there. This did not age well. And let's just tell you that this also just tells you that for the most part, something about when you have stories like this on, something's bad about this. Because you know what? This guy has now been made to be a hypocrite. Because right now, he could be called out on the floor on this. Blake Lively is a much bigger star. And this fight's not going to be good. And if it goes to court, another Johnny Depp, Amber Heard type trial. And I don't know well how he's going to do this. But I also want to just play, real quick before we go, a clip from where he was on his Men Enough podcast talking about violence in men.
Dying inside, waiting for someone like Shawn Mendes to write something as simple as the reason I called my book Man Enough Undefining My Masculinity was because I realized the redefining of it would perpetuate the exact same problem. The problem isn't the definition. The problem is that someone has decided what it means to be a man. Who was the person? What did he look like? Was it a bunch of men? Were they all the same type of men? Because what it seems to be the case is that the men who decided what being a man looked like all seem to be the same type of man.
Okay, so there's that part. That's from the Man Enough podcast. But now we don't know what's going to happen with that podcast. We don't know what's going to happen with him. But in closing, let's take this all away, okay? So everything I said about that character in that movie, I was right about. Second, I will say this as well. If you're going to go ahead and follow a guy like that, and you think this male feminist here is going to go ahead and be the answer to everything that's going on here, and he's going to act properly to a woman like Blake Lively in a movie like that, again, he just contradicts everything. If everything is true right now, this lawsuit, it contradicts everything that you could say about this guy and everything he stands for. And I think once they get into an actual story about this, and we actually go ahead and see the real truth about this sexual harassment lawsuit comes to light, we're going to find out. This guy is a hypocrite. He was, disingenuous when he could have just been like every other guy, depraved and debaucherous.